Welcome to this episode of Educond on Aristotle, part of our philosophy series. Today, we're diving into the mind of a thinker who lived from 384 to 322 BCE. And his goal, well, it was about as ambitious as it gets, to bring all of human knowledge into one single coherent system. For almost 2,000 years, the Western world literally saw reality through his eyes. But to really get a handle on his ideas, we first have to understand the incredible, almost unbelievable authority he commanded.
Just let that sink in for a second. The Philosopher. That wasn't just a nickname, it was the designation. In medieval Europe, if you were in a debate and you said, "The Philosopher says," everyone, and I mean everyone, knew you were talking about Aristotle. His word was practically law. So who was this man who earned such a monumental title?
While Aristotle's life was shaped by two of the absolute biggest names in history, on one side you have his teacher, the great idealist Plato, and on the other, his student, the world conqueror himself, Alexander the Great. And believe me, these relationships weren't just trivia points. They were the forces that forged his entire philosophy and, ultimately, his fate.
So let's trace his path real quick. He's born into this family of doctors, which is key. It gives him this hands-on observational way of looking at the world from day one. Then he spends 20 years, 2 whole decades, at Plato's academy, soaking it all in, but also starting to push back. He tutors the kid who would become Alexander the Great, and then founds his own school, the Lyceum. But here's the twist. That connection to power, it became a huge liability. When Alexander dies, Athens turns on Aristotle. He gets hit with this bogus charge of impiety and has to flee, saying he wouldn't let Athens sin twice against philosophy, a direct, chilling reference to what happened to Socrates.
And this quote, this says it all. It's the core of Aristotle's entire project. He loved and respected his teacher, no doubt, but his ultimate loyalty, it was to the truth, to what he could actually see and touch and measure. This wasn't just a friendly disagreement, it was a pivot for all of Western thought, away from the abstract world of ideas and down to the messy, fascinating, concrete reality right in front of us. And that commitment to the real world led him to his life's work, the Lyceum. Now, don't think of this as just a school. No way. This was the world's first real research institute. It was a place where Aristotle and his students took on the absolutely insane project of investigating, categorizing, and explaining, well, everything.
Just look at the scope of their work. It's breathtaking, isn't it? I mean, today, every single one of these is its own department at a university. For Aristotle, they were all just connected pieces of one giant puzzle. He basically invented the field of formal logic, laid the groundwork for modern biology, and wrote the founding texts on how to live a good life and build a good society. The ambition here is just off the charts.
And this wasn't some shoestring operation either. This number, $4 million, is a rough modern estimate of the funding he got from his old pupil, Alexander the Great. And that money wasn't just for buying scrolls. It funded a massive network of people all over the known world, collecting plant and animal specimens. See, his philosophy wasn't just him sitting under a tree thinking. It was a huge, well-funded, data-driven scientific project.
Okay, so you have this flood of data coming in from all over the world. How do you even begin to organize it? You need new tools for thinking. So, Aristotle just invented them. He essentially created a brand new operating system for the Western mind, a set of concepts that would shape how we analyze the world for the next 2,000 years. And this right here is the biggest break from Plato. For Plato, the real chair was some perfect, unchanging idea of a chair floating around in another dimension. The one you're actually sitting in, just a cheap knockoff. Aristotle basically said, that's a nice poem, but let's get real. He argued that the form of a thing, its blueprint, its essence, is inside the thing itself. It's inseparable from the matter. Reality isn't out there somewhere, it's right here. You want to understand the world? Just look at the world.
So, how do you really, truly explain something? Aristotle gave us this amazing 4-part toolkit. Let's take this table. The material cause is what it's made of, the wood. The formal cause is its design, the blueprint in the carpenter's mind. The efficient cause is the thing that actually made it, the carpenter hammering away. And then there's the big one, the most important one for Aristotle, the final cause, its purpose, or telos. This table is made for something, and in his view, everything in the universe, from an acorn to you and me, has a purpose it's trying to fulfill.
And that idea of a final purpose, it leads us straight to the biggest question there is, right? If everything has a purpose, what is the purpose of a human life? How are we supposed to live to fulfill our telos? This is where we get into the heart of Aristotle's ethics and politics. And his answer is so beautifully practical.
The golden mean. As you can see here, virtue isn't about being some kind of extreme saint. It's all about finding the skillful balance between two extremes. Take courage. It's not having no fear at all. That's just being reckless. And it's not being paralyzed by fear. That's cowardice. It's that sweet spot right in the middle. For Aristotle, living a good life isn't about memorizing rules. It's a skill you have to practice and develop, just like learning to play an instrument.
So what's the goal of all this? What's the telos of a life lived virtuously? The Greeks had a word for it, eudaimonia. Now, we often translate that as happiness, but that really doesn't do it justice. It's not about just feeling good for a moment. It's much deeper. It means human flourishing. It's that deep sense of fulfillment you get from being the best version of yourself, from using your reason and your talents to their absolute full.
It's almost impossible to overstate Aristotle's influence. I mean, the guy shaped the world. But what's really wild is that his legacy, it almost didn't happen. The very works that defined Western thought for centuries were nearly lost forever.
This story is just incredible. His major writings, which were really his lecture notes, got passed down and eventually ended up in the cellar of a family that had no clue what they were. For over 100 years, they just sat there, in a damp basement, rotting, getting eaten by mice and mold. They were eventually found, bought by a collector, captured as war loot by a Roman general, and finally, almost 300 years after Aristotle died, they were edited into the books we have today. It's just a crazy reminder of how fragile knowledge really is.
So, after that near-death experience, his work was rediscovered, often through the brilliant scholarship of the Islamic world. And by the 1200s, his authority was so complete that the great theologian Thomas Aquinas could just call him ille philosophus, the philosopher, and everyone knew exactly who he meant. His system became the very foundation of science and theology for centuries.
And that leads us to the great paradox of Aristotle's legacy. For 2,000 years, he gave us the very tools we use to understand the world. But that same incredible authority eventually became a kind of prison. The scientific revolution, in a lot of ways, had to start by tearing down the very house that Aristotle built. So, was he the ultimate foundation for progress, or was he an obstacle to it? The real answer, it seems, is that he was profoundly both.